Bad news, everybody. Content is coming up. I put content in this one. This video is going to contain some discussion about police violence against black people in the United States. If you're sensitive to that type of discussion, I would definitely recommend not watching this particular video. Hello, it's me, Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze. Before I get started, I'd like to point out that BadEmpanada already did a video about Watchmen and liberal ideology. His video covers a lot of the same stuff I'm going to talk about, but he comes to a very different conclusion than I do. This is a different video, no plagiarism intended, all rights belong to the owners. I love Watchmen, the comic by Dave Gibbons and Alan Moore, not the TV show we're going to be discussing today. That I'm not so hot on. I first read it in my early 20s, so you know Homeboy misinterpreted it. Misinterpreted it to think Rorschach was an uncompromising badass instead of a crypto-fascist monster. I like to think I have a better understanding of the subject matter now. The comic doesn't need me to sing its praises. If anything, it's over-celebrated, presented as though it alone redeems the graphic novel as a storytelling medium in a sea of erstwhile garbage. In 2005, Time magazine created a list of the 100 greatest novels of all time, and Watchmen was the only comic book on that list, though it was still number 98 because it's a comic book, come on, it's not for smarties. It's a masterpiece, don't get me wrong, but you already know Watchmen's a masterpiece, you don't need me to tell you that. If you're at all familiar with comic books, you know Watchmen is one of the best comic books of all time. Maybe, even if you're not familiar with comic books, you know that. Then in the future year of 2019, Damon Lindelof made a TV series with HBO that continued the Watchmen universe. I'm going to be very critical of this show, and I want to emphasize that it's not really because I think the show does a bad job of living up to the legacy of the comic, or even that it shouldn't exist, probably. It was inevitable that somebody would do this kind of shit with Watchmen. It's way too popular to just let sit as a cohesive work of art. No, it had to become a franchise. That's just how art works under capitalism. And no television program is going to live up to the legacy of Watchmen, and certainly no television show of Watchmen should exist. Even if we set aside the issue of ownership, or whether or not DC Comics or their parent company Warner Brothers even has a legitimate right to adapt this property in the first place, just narratively, the story's over. I'm not looking for more stories in this world because this world only existed to tell this story. Also, Watchmen is like so specifically a comic book, like it's designed to tell a story in a way that only a comic book can. But you know, someone was going to do it eventually, and all things being equal, this show is about the best we could have gotten. At least the show attempts to grapple with the themes of the novel. At least it shows a basic understanding of the character motivations of the returning cast, except for Laurie, and Dr. Manhattan, and Ozymandias. And at least Zack Snyder wasn't involved. Not today. You stay out of this. Hell, I even kind of liked the show. I have a lot of problems with it, as you'll see, but the whole time I was watching it, no matter how frustrated I got with the subject matter, the idea of stopping was just inconceivable to me. The show has a lot of problems, but it is never boring, not even for a second. I don't think it's very good, but it's so ambitiously not very good. It's not good in such brilliant and interesting ways. And it does have some genuinely good elements, to be sure. The soundtrack is fucking amazing, every shot is beautiful, and the performances are great, even if some of the people delivering those performances are garbage human beings.
What we had in England, which was, it was not marriage, but it was a union you could make if you were gay and you wanted to make a civil partnership.
Yeah, civil union sort of has the same rights as marriage, but
That's
not the
right.
name.
Same rights, not the name. And it seems to me that now they're fighting for the name, and I worry that it means somehow we debase or we change what marriage is.
The opening scene of the show takes place during the Tulsa Massacre, where white supremacists invaded the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, killing people and destroying black-run businesses. A chilling reminder of the type of white supremacist violence that is foundational in American history. The very next scene shows a black police officer being murdered by a white supremacist because he was unable to unlock his gun holster because the bureaucrats in the head office care more about following regulations than the lives of officers on duty. And just, okay? That's fucking all right? To frame these two things side by side presents a pretty clear message. In the past, in the 1920s, 100 years ago, racism was institutional. There was no way for people to protect themselves from white supremacy, because white supremacists controlled the government and society. But now, in the year 2019, which was now then it became not now, now it's then, where the show takes place, white supremacy is just a fringe ideology on the outskirts of polite society. Something rural bumpkins in some barn might believe, but not something the police and state are complicit in. The police and state protect people from white supremacists, so any attempt to defang them or take away their ability to easily kill at a second's notice will inevitably put power into the hands of white supremacists. So, a few things. One, you might notice that the American government has been getting way cozier with white nationalism lately. Guys like Steve Bannon, Steve King, presumably some racist guys not named Steve. The president just straight up saying nationalism is good a few times. The concentration camps, that's a big one. Secondly, it's a little fucked up to write a white civilian shooting a black cop, given that in real life there's an epidemic of white cops shooting black civilians in the United States. Data suggests that black men are twice as likely to be fatally shot by the police as white men. Police fatally shot 1,165 people in 2018, and about 50 cops were fatally shot in the line of duty, a disparity of roughly 23 to 1. Black people were also far more likely to be shot by the police specifically when unarmed, which should put the whole fictional drama about the cop not being able to get his gun out of his holster in perspective. Thirdly, it's a bit rich to suggest that cops are what's protecting us from white supremacists, given that according to FBI reports, there is considerable infiltration of law enforcement by white supremacist groups. We don't know exactly how much, because much of these reports are redacted, and also because there's no screening process in place to make sure that cops aren't part of hate groups. And I think there probably should be, given that hate groups have made a consistent and prolonged effort to place members into active law enforcement. Something I'm sure the police were able to absorb quite easily because, fourthly, American policing evolved out of slave-catching patrols and has always been a white supremacist institution. To quote an article by Dr. Victor E. Kappeler at Eastern Kentucky University's Police Studies Department, the birth and development of the American police can be traced to a multitude of historical, legal, and political economic conditions. The institution of slavery and the control of minorities, however, were two of the more formidable historic features of American society shaping early policing. Slave patrols and night watches, which later became modern police departments, were both designed to control the behaviors of minorities. This is all the first two scenes of the fucking show. Hey, American racism, that was a real problem back in the 20s. The old 20s, not the current. Do you know what's getting black people killed now? Attempts to curb police violence.
We have breaking news out of Dallas, Texas right now. A jury has just found a former Dallas police officer guilty on murder charges. You remember Amber Geiger? She was charged last year after shooting and killing her unarmed neighbor.
We're following tragic news out of Fort Worth, Texas. An African-American woman was shot and killed by a white police officer while she was inside her own home. This incident marks the 9th police-involved shooting in Fort Worth just this year alone.
We don't know what the SWAT team was looking for that night. The FBI isn't commenting on this story, but according to the lawsuit, the agents were looking for the wrong house. The right house was about a block away.
I said, we apologize, this is the wrong house. Went down the street to the correct house, and you just hear it all over it again, the bang, the boom, and in my mind, I'm thinking, pray that that family is okay.
New and troubling video, a deadly encounter with police, this time in Delaware. 4 officers rushing to the scene, Two of them you can see here, their weapons drawn, pointing at a young man in a wheelchair.
If police can't just pull out their gun and start blasting, we'll be overrun by white supremacists. Okay, I suppose it would be a lot easier to let go of this if the show wasn't trying to be critical of the police. Like if they were just the usual Copaganda you see on TV, I wouldn't care so much. But the show seems to be trying to critique the police in its own useless liberal way. The cops all dress like superheroes, echoing the criticisms of superheroes that the original comic made. They're violent, jingoistic, and oh yeah, it turns out they're being led by a Klansman and a secret Beto O'Rourke-looking guy who is part of the Rorschach guys. So he's Beto O'Rourke. Got him. But then the other cops are like, nah, I don't like that. I don't support that. We'll get rid of that. You see, the problem is individual, not institutional. But there's an extended subplot about a black police officer trying to change the system from the inside, but finding that institutionalized racism resists reform. And then the justice system resists any attempt to root out corruption. All of which happens in the 1940s. So once again, institutionalized racism is framed as a thing of the past. These scenes are literally shot in black and white. They're literally someone's memories. Just so you know, that's old-timey. That type of stuff doesn't happen anymore. In the modern day, if we just get rid of 2 or 3 backwards individuals, then everything's gonna be okie dokie. And the show barely even talks about police surveillance, how the cops have their eyeballs on you. I said the secret word. Hello and welcome to the Eyeball Zone. Look upon my eyeballs, ye mighty in despair. Get it? Ozymandias? That's a character in Watchmen. We all know that capitalism is a death cult, but how are we going to explain it to your pals? You don't own enough costumes to do it theatrically enough. You're gonna look like a big nerd. If I seem like a big nerd to you, that's why. But don't worry, YouTuber Grem, part of the pamphleteer family of YouTube video friends, has you covered. Check out Grem's video, The Cult of Capitalism, all about how capitalist indoctrination eerily mirrors the indoctrination methods used by cults to recruit people to give you free personality tests. Just kidding, this is satire, don't sue me. Do you have an explicitly leftist project you'd like to see featured on the Eyeball Zone? Then send me exactly one email to thoughtslimeeditor@gmail.com with pertinent details and your pronouns. And what might be helpful is if you wanted me to do that favor for you, that you listen to the instructions that I gave instead of just asking me somewhere else. Even though in literally every video I make, I tell you exactly what to do. Okay, bye. The whole thing about the police dressing like superheroes would probably make a better point if the police weren't framed like actual superheroes on the show. They're better at doing violence than anybody, and they look cool, and they get all the cool one-liners. And yeah, sometimes they torture a guy, but it was a bad guy, so don't worry about that. There's quite a few scenes dedicated to showing how this super cop can read people's micro-expressions and determine when they're lying. Now this is complete pseudoscience, which would be fine in a sci-fi television show. However, this particular pseudoscience is used in real life to convict people of serious crimes, even though there's no real evidence that it works. Paul Ekman, an American psychologist who is not a total fraud, and if you're paying close attention, you might have noticed that when I said Ekman was not a fraud, I looked down and to the left, indicating I might be being dishonest. Dr. Ekman, not to be confused with Dr. Eggman, teaches law enforcement agencies all over the world methodology for catching liars, which he has studied extensively, and he knows it works, but he can't publish it for peer review, of course, because then people would learn all sorts of government secrets. From an article in Nature.com, Ekman's critics argue that most of his peer-reviewed studies on microexpressions were published decades ago, and much of the more recent writing on the subject has not been peer-reviewed. Ekman maintains that this publishing strategy is deliberate, that he no longer publishes all of the details of his work in the peer-reviewed literature because, he says, those papers are closely followed by scientists in countries such as Syria, Iran, and China, which the United States views as a potential threat. Oh, and by the way, he also says some people are just naturally good at detecting microexpressions, and thus deceit, and he calls those people wizards. No, I am not joking. And they don't require any sort of training. They just use their wizard power to look at you and know when you're lying, and that's enough to convict someone of a serious crime. All of this sounds very legit to me. Why would he lie about it? What would he have to gain? Seems kind of irresponsible to me to validate something like that in a show that is attempting to honestly grapple with the problems of modern policing. It gives the impression that bogus forensics like this aren't worth questioning. Once again, can't publish this shit for peer review. The Chinese might find out. But you can sign up for a course and learn all about it. Also, a lot of our clients are companies that do a lot of business in China, so it seems kind of weird to me that we're not, even when it's revealed that the police in Tulsa are being controlled by white supremacists, all that is required is to get rid of the racist individuals and the problem is solved. No changes to the system required. In fact, the two changes that the show posits, making the cops have to call into dispatch to use their guns, and making cops wear superhero costumes for no reason, are presented as very bad ideas. And to be fair, one of them definitely is. The cops dress like superheroes because otherwise there wouldn't be enough superheroes in your show based on the comic entirely about superheroes as a concept. The fictional explanation is that Beto O'Rorschach needed to introduce a bill to let cops wear masks, so he got all the Rorschach bunch to kill all the cops in Tulsa, and then they had no choice but to hide their identities and also wear weird, ostentatious, colorful outfits that suit their personality. He needed to do this, you see, so that he could become president. But then later, off screen, he abandoned that master plan and came to another master plan that didn't involve that, but he kept doing the mask thing. I get, just in case he needed to become president later, in case his other master plan didn't work out and he needed to become president, obviously, the mask bill, that he needed to do that because it would be so wildly popular that would make him president. That makes sense. That's good writing. But the other reform, the idea that there should probably be some checks on police violence, that's like the central demand of Black Lives Matter. Also, there's a character who's a super genius billionaire, and then we find out that the reason she's a super genius is because she's the daughter of another super genius billionaire. So, genius is heritable. But just so you know, she got there on her own merit. Her dad didn't give her any money, because anyone who's smart enough can just become a billionaire. Also, there's a scene where a character asks Dr. Manhattan about the genocide he committed, and he's like, oops. And then that character, who he's talking to, who is a Vietnamese citizen herself, just accepts that and also falls in love with him. Also, her parents were wonderful, loving American GIs in Vietnam who were killed by a suicide bomb. She points out one of the guys involved in the bombing to the police, and he is summarily executed on the spot on the word of a child. This child grows up to be our main character, and this is such an uplifting memory for her that she becomes a police officer herself. Then, in the end, she becomes God, because Dr. Manhattan can see everybody, and she's the only one on Earth who deserves it. Now, what am I saying about this show? Am I saying that it's racist? Am I saying that everyone who watches this show is a big racist? Yes. I personally get to decide what is and is not racist. And this show is the most racist work of art ever created. And if you watched it and liked it, as I did, you're the world's worst racist. No, I'm not saying that. It's okay if you like the show. I just think it has some fucked up pro-cop bullshit and some ideas that didn't really think through that much. Don't get mad at me on Twitter, please. Thanks for watching another one of my classic videos. Another video in the books from me, ThoughtSlime. Check out all these cute little drawings. You can get a drawing like that over at patreon.com/thoughtslime. But maybe you can't afford to, and that's okay too. In that case, what you can always do to support your old buddy, your old pal ThoughtSlime, is give that video a like and hit that subscribe button, ring that fucking bell thing. That'll make the videos show up in your subscription feed, because YouTube makes a lot of sense. But maybe you're not satisfied and you want more ThoughtSlime in your life. That's weird, but fine. You can go to youtube.com/scaredycatstv, and if that doesn't do you good enough, You can check me out every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at twitch.tv/thoughtslime. Who watches The Watchmen? I do, apparently. I watched it. Good joke. Roll and snare drum. Everybody laugh.